"There's no room for you at our New Year's Eve party, Mom. You'll just spend it alone. It'll be quieter for you." The words hung in the air like a slap that never quite landed but left the sting anyway. My son Daniel rattled them off so quickly, so mechanically, that for a moment I wondered if he'd rehearsed them. His eyes darted away from the phone screen, refusing to meet mine even through the pixelated distance of a video call. I could see everything in that tiny square on my screen. The nervous twitch of his jaw, the way his Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard, the deliberate avoidance that spoke louder than any apology he'd never give. It was December 27th, a gray Thursday afternoon in Manhattan, the kind where the winter light fades by 4:30 and the city takes on that peculiar quality of being both crowded and lonely at the same time. I'd been sitting in my favorite armchair by the window, the one with the view of the East River, sipping Earl Grey from my grandmother's bone china teacup. The radiator hissed softly in the corner. Outside, I could hear the muffled sounds of traffic, the occasional honking, the rhythm of the city that had been my home for 40 years. When my phone lit up with Daniel's name, my heart had done that little skip it always does when your child calls. That involuntary flutter of maternal hope, the instinct that never dies no matter how many times it gets disappointed. I'd set down my teacup carefully on its saucer, hearing that delicate clink of porcelain on porcelain, and answered with a smile in my voice. "Daniel, sweetheart, I was just thinking about New Year's Eve. Should I bring the cranberry relish, or would you prefer I make that apple pie Lily loves?" There was a pause. Not a natural pause, but the kind loaded with discomfort, with words being swallowed and rearranged. In the background of his video feed, I could see their living room, the one in the rented house in Greenwich, Connecticut, that he liked to call our estate on social media. The Christmas tree was still up, dripping with ornaments that looked expensive but probably came from Home Goods. And there, just visible over his shoulder, was Tiffany. My daughter-in-law stood in front of their hallway mirror, the full-length one with the ornate gold frame that I knew for a fact cost $1,900 because she'd posted about it on Instagram with the caption, "Investing in timeless pieces for our home." She was wearing a dress that caught the light with every movement, gold sequins, strapless, the kind of thing that screamed, "Look at me, I'm important, I'm successful, I'm worthy of attention." Her blonde hair was swept up in an elaborate updo, and even through the phone screen, I could see the concentration on her face as she adjusted an earring. She glanced toward Daniel, just once, a quick, sharp look that I wasn't supposed to catch, but I did. And in that look, I saw everything I needed to know. "Mom," Daniel started again, and this time his voice had that quality of someone who'd been coached, someone repeating lines fed to them by another person. "About the dinner here at the house." My chest tightened, not with panic, but with that creeping realization that precedes disappointment. You know that feeling? When you can already see the shape of the hurt coming toward you, but you're still hoping, still praying that you're wrong, that this time will be different, that your child will choose you over the opinion of someone who didn't give birth to him, didn't raise him, didn't sacrifice for him? "Yes, honey?" I kept my voice steady, warm, encouraging. Give him room to do the right thing, I thought. Give him space to be the man I raised him to be. Tiffany's organized something a bit more exclusive this year. Exclusive. The word landed like a stone in water, sending ripples through my calm afternoon. I watched his face on the screen. He was looking down now, at something off camera. His phone, probably. Or notes. Did she write him notes? Did they plan this conversation? There will be important people, you know, her clients, some influential friends she's made through her wellness platform. "We thought it would be best if I didn't come," I finished for him, my voice quiet. He winced, actually winced, as if I'd struck him instead of simply stating the truth he was dancing around. "It's not personal, Mom. It's just that there's no room, literally no room. The house is small. We're at capacity, and with Tiffany's business associates and the people she's trying to impress, connect with, it's just more of a networking event than a family thing this year. You understand, right? You'll just spend it alone. It'll be quieter for you, more peaceful. You like peace, don't you?" The rationalization poured out of him like water from a broken faucet. Each word was designed to make this sound reasonable, logical, even considerate, as if being excluded from my only son's home on New Year's Eve was actually a gift to me, as if loneliness was something I'd requested. Behind him, Tiffany had moved closer. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, one perfectly manicured nail tapping against her forearm, waiting, watching, making sure he followed through. I looked at my son's face on that screen, 41 years old, the same face I'd kissed goodnight for 18 years, the same face I'd watched transform from baby to boy, to teenager, to man. The same face that had cried on my shoulder when his father died 11 years ago, when Daniel was 30 and still young enough to need his mother, still vulnerable enough to show it. When had that face learned to lie so smoothly? I thought about saying something. I thought about reminding him of the nights I worked double shifts at the firm so he could have the tutors he needed for his college entrance exams. I thought about mentioning the down payment I made on his first car, $14,500, paid from my savings account while I delayed replacing my own aging Honda. I thought about bringing up his wedding. Oh, that wedding. Tiffany had wanted everything. The venue in Westchester with the garden ceremony and the ballroom reception. The photographer who charged $8,000 for 12 hours. The videographer who cost another $6,000. The flowers, God, those flowers, imported peonies and garden roses that ran $12,000 alone. The open bar with premium liquors. The jazz quartet for cocktail hour and the DJ for the reception. The sit-down dinner for 200 people at $185 per plate. I'd written the check, $65,000. I'd smiled through the whole thing, even when Tiffany barely thanked me, even when her own parents contributed nothing but their presence and their opinions. I'd danced at that wedding. I'd toasted my son's happiness. I'd hugged my new daughter-in-law and welcomed her to our family. And now there was no room for me at her table. I understand, son, I said softly. Relief washed over his face so visibly that it almost made me laugh. Almost. You do? Oh, Mom, I knew you'd get it. You're so understanding. We'll do something, just the three of us. You, me, and Lily, in January. I promise. A nice lunch somewhere. Lily's been asking about you. Has she? My voice caught on those words, just slightly. Lily, my granddaughter. 10 years old with my late husband's dark curls and my mother's smile. The only one in that house who still called me regularly, who still wanted my stories, who still asked me to teach her how to knit and bake and do the things that Tiffany considered outdated domestic activities. Yeah, she has. You know how she is. Anyway, Mom, I've got to run. Tiffany's waving at me. We've got the caterer coming for a tasting in 20 minutes. Happy almost New Year. We'll talk soon. And just like that, he hung up. The screen went black. My reflection stared back at me from the dark glass. A 61-year-old woman with silver-streaked brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing a cream cashmere cardigan and no makeup, because who needs makeup when you're spending a Thursday afternoon alone in your apartment? I set the phone down on the side table next to my teacup. The tea had gone cold. I could see a film forming on its surface, that thin membrane that Earl Grey develops when it's been sitting too long. I didn't pick it up again. I just sat there, looking out the window at the city. The sun was setting, painting the winter sky in shades of purple and orange that most people miss because they're rushing somewhere, always rushing. I watched it slowly sink behind the buildings across the river, watched the lights start to twinkle on in apartments and offices, watched the city transform from day to night, the way it does every single evening, indifferent to human heartbreak. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I didn't cry. I was 61 years old, and I'd learned a long time ago that tears don't change anything. They don't make ungrateful children grateful. They don't make selfish people generous. They don't rewrite the past or reshape the future. They just make your face puffy and your head ache. But it hurt. Oh, it hurt in a way that was almost physical. A tightness in my chest that made breathing feel like work. A heaviness in my limbs that made standing up seem impossible. An ache behind my eyes that had nothing to do with tears and everything to do with the weight of realization. My son was ashamed of me. That was the truth underneath all his excuses about room capacity and networking events. He was ashamed of his simple mother who lived in a modest apartment and wore sensible shoes and didn't drive a luxury car or vacation in the Hamptons or post carefully curated photos of an enviable lifestyle on social media. I thought about his childhood. The apartment we'd lived in when he was small, a one-bedroom in Queens where I slept on the pull-out sofa so he could have the bedroom. The sound of his laughter when I'd take him to the park, pushing him on the swings until my arms ached. The pride in his eyes when I attended every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every Little League game, even when I was exhausted from 50-hour work weeks. His father, Thomas, had died when Daniel was 30. A heart attack, sudden and vicious, the kind that takes a man in his prime without warning. Thomas had been 55. We'd been married for 32 years. He was a good man, a gentleman, a high school history teacher who believed education could change lives. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. We were happy. After Thomas died, I was the one Daniel called at 2 a.m. when he couldn't sleep, when the grief felt like it was crushing him. I was the one who helped him and Tiffany with the down payment on their first condo, $28,000 from the life insurance money that was supposed to be for my retirement. I was the one who babysat Lily every weekend for the first 3 years of her life, while they focused on their careers and their marriage. And now there was no room for me. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 61 years in my knees, in my lower back, in the stiffness of my neck. I walked to the kitchen, a small galley kitchen with white subway tiles and open shelving where I displayed the dishes I'd collected over the years. I poured the cold tea down the drain, rinsed the cup and saucer, and set them in the dish rack to dry. The kitchen window looked out onto an air shaft, a narrow space between buildings where pigeons nested and other people's cooking smells drifted. Not a glamorous view, but it was mine. This whole apartment was mine, paid off 15 years ago, every mortgage payment made on time through disciplined budgeting and careful financial planning. It wasn't much by Manhattan standards. A one-bedroom on the Upper East Side, in a building with no doorman, no gym, no concierge service. Just a clean, safe, rent-stabilized apartment that I'd bought when the building went co-op in 1995. 700 square feet of space that I'd made into a home with my grandmother's furniture, my mother's paintings, and books, so many books, lining every available wall. Daniel had grown up here after we moved from Queens when he was 12. This was where he'd studied for his SATs at the kitchen table. This was where he'd brought his girlfriends to meet me, nervously introducing each one, watching my reaction. This was where he'd told me he was going to propose to Tiffany, his eyes shining with hope and love that I wanted so desperately to believe would last. And now he couldn't even find room for me in his rented house for one evening. I opened the refrigerator, staring at its contents without really seeing them. A carton of eggs, a half-empty container of yogurt, some leftover soup in a glass container. The ingredients for a solitary life. My phone buzzed. I walked back to the living room, thinking maybe Daniel had reconsidered. Maybe his conscience had kicked in, maybe. It was a text from Tiffany, my first direct communication from her in weeks. Hi, Eleanor. Just wanted to make sure Daniel talked to you about NYE. We're going in a different direction this year, more sophisticated crowd. You understand. Let's definitely plan a lunch in the new year. Happy holidays. The emojis. She'd sent me emojis. As if 3 tiny pictographs could somehow soften the rejection, could make being excluded feel festive and fun. I stared at that message for a long time, at the casual cruelty of more sophisticated crowd, at the assumption that I would just accept this, would just understand, would just disappear quietly so she could play the role of successful wellness influencer with her aspirational lifestyle and her carefully curated friends. Did she know? Did she have any idea who I was before I became Daniel's mother or Lily's grandmother? Did she know about the career I'd built over 37 years, climbing from entry-level human resources assistant to senior vice president of talent management at a Fortune 500 company? Did she know about the negotiations I'd led, the executives I'd advised, the organizational transformations I'd guided? Of course she didn't know, because I never talked about it, because I'd retired at 58, taken my pension and my retirement accounts, and simply stepped away from that world. I didn't need the titles anymore. I didn't need the validation. I'd spent nearly 4 decades proving myself in boardrooms and conference rooms, and I was done. I wanted peace. I wanted time to read and think and exist without the constant pressure to perform, to compete, to climb. But quiet confidence, I was learning, looked like weakness to people like Tiffany. Contentment looked like failure. Simplicity looked like poverty. I sat back down in my chair by the window. The city was fully dark now, transformed into a carpet of light stretching as far as I could see. Somewhere out there, in apartments and houses across New York, families were planning their New Year's Eve celebrations, setting tables, chilling champagne, stringing lights, including their mothers. The radiator hissed again, and I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. What was I going to do? Sit here alone on New Year's Eve? Watch the ball drop on television by myself? Make a cup of tea at midnight and toast to nothing in particular? The thought was almost unbearable. Not because I was afraid of solitude. I'd lived alone for 11 years since Thomas died, and I'd made peace with it. But because this loneliness was chosen for me by someone who should have chosen me. That was the wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through my contacts. Old colleagues, mostly retired now. A few friends from my book club. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who was lovely but was spending the holidays with her daughter in California. Everyone had plans. Everyone was going somewhere, doing something, being with someone. Everyone except me. I thought about calling Daniel back, about begging, about asking if there was really no room. If they couldn't squeeze in one more chair, if I could just sit quietly in a corner and not bother anyone, just so I could see Lily, just so I could be part of my family for one night. But I didn't, because I still had my dignity, even if I had nothing else. I stood up again and walked to my bedroom. It was a small room, barely large enough for a full-size bed and a dresser, but I'd made it cozy with soft linens and good lighting and a reading chair by the window. I opened my closet. A narrow space packed with clothes accumulated over decades. Most of it was practical. Work clothes from my corporate days, now outdated but still serviceable. Casual pants and sweaters for everyday wear. A few nice pieces for the rare occasions when I went somewhere that required dressing up. And in the very back, in a garment bag I hadn't opened in 3 years, was a dress. I pulled out the bag and unzipped it slowly. The fabric inside was a deep burgundy, the color of expensive wine. It was a gown, actually, floor-length, with a subtle shimmer to the fabric that caught light without being gaudy. I'd bought it for my MBA graduation ceremony 33 years ago. It had cost me 2 weeks' salary back then, an extravagance I'd justified because I'd worked so hard for that degree, juggling classes at night while working full-time and raising a baby. I hadn't worn it in years. Had it even fit me anymore? I held it up against my body, looking at my reflection in the dresser mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired, defeated, small, but there was something else there too, something in the set of my jaw, in the way I held my shoulders, something that whispered, "You're not done yet." I hung the dress on the outside of the closet door and stared at it for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone and did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I called an old friend, not just any friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but who'd left a voicemail on my birthday 2 months ago. A message I'd saved, but never returned, because what would we even talk about after all this time? The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Eleanor?" The voice on the other end was warm, surprised, delighted. "Michael," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time, but I need to ask you something." And just like that, something shifted in the universe, just slightly, just enough. "So let me ask you something. If your own child excluded you from a family celebration because you didn't fit the image they wanted to project, what would you do? Would you accept it quietly? Would you fight back? Would you just let them erase you from their perfect picture? I'd love to know what you think. Leave a comment below and tell me, was I right to just say, 'I understand' and hang up? Or should I have said something different? Because what happened next? Well, let me just say that sometimes silence is more powerful than any argument. The next 48 hours passed in a strange, suspended silence. December 28th dawned gray and cold, the kind of day where the clouds sit so low over Manhattan that the tops of the tallest buildings disappear into mist. I woke at 6:30 out of habit. 37 years of corporate life had trained my body to rise early, and retirement hadn't changed that internal clock. I lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of yesterday's conversation settle over me like a heavy blanket. In the kitchen, I made coffee in my old percolator, the one that had been a wedding gift from Thomas's aunt 40 years ago. It gurgled and hissed, filling the apartment with that rich, bitter smell that most people associate with comfort. I poured it into my favorite mug, white ceramic with a crack along the handle that I'd never bothered to replace, and stood by the window, watching the city wake up. People hurried past on the street below, bundled in winter coats, breath visible in the cold air. A woman walked her dog, a small terrier that stopped to sniff every tree. A delivery truck double-parked, hazard lights flashing, while the driver unloaded boxes. Life continued, indifferent to my small heartbreak. I spent the morning cleaning, not because the apartment was dirty, but because I needed to do something with my hands, needed to keep moving or risk sinking into the kind of thinking that leads nowhere good. I dusted the bookshelves, wiped down the kitchen counters, changed the sheets on my bed, physical tasks that required no emotional energy. At noon, my phone buzzed, a text from Lily, sent secretly from her school iPad. "Grandma, I'm sad you won't be at the party." I asked Dad why, and he said it was complicated. "What does that mean?" "I love you. Can I come visit you soon?" My throat tightened. I sat down on the edge of the bed, holding the phone with both hands as if it were something precious and fragile. That child, that sweet, innocent child who didn't understand adult cruelty, who still believed families were supposed to be together, who still thought love was simple and unconditional. I texted back, "I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the stars in the sky. Yes, you can visit very soon, I promise. Grandma's going to have a wonderful New Year's. Don't worry about me. Study hard in school." The heart emoji felt silly, but Lily loved emojis, and I wanted to give her that small comfort. I didn't hear from Daniel that day. Not a call, not a text, not even a cursory checking in message. It was as if, having delivered his verdict, he could now wash his hands of me until it was convenient to remember I existed again. That evening, I made myself dinner, a simple pasta with olive oil and garlic, a small salad, and ate it at the kitchen table while reading a novel I'd been working through for weeks. But I couldn't concentrate. The words swam on the page, meaningless symbols that refused to form coherent thoughts. After 15 minutes, I gave up and washed the dishes. The silence in the apartment was profound, not peaceful, but oppressive. The kind of silence that makes you aware of every small sound, the humming of the refrigerator, the creaking of the building settling, the distant sound of sirens somewhere in the city. The kind of silence that makes you realize how completely alone you are. I thought about Thomas. If he were still alive, would this have happened? Would Daniel have dared to exclude me if his father were here to hold him accountable? Thomas had been gentle, but he'd also been firm about family values, about respect, about the obligation we owe to the people who raised us. But Thomas wasn't here, and I was learning that without him as a buffer, without him as a witness to my worth, I'd become optional in my own son's life. I went to bed early that night, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, watching the headlights from passing cars sweep across the walls. My mind replayed the conversation with Daniel over and over, analyzing every word, every inflection, looking for the moment where I could have said something different, could have changed the outcome. But there was no such moment. This wasn't about anything I'd done or failed to do. This was about Tiffany's need to curate a perfect image, and I didn't fit into that picture. Simple as that. Cruel as that. Around 2 a.m, I got up and went to the living room. I turned on a single lamp and sat in my chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket, looking out at the sleeping city. This was rock bottom, I thought. This feeling of being discarded by your own child. This feeling of being invisible, irrelevant, easily erased. December 29th arrived with sunshine, as if the weather were mocking my mood. I woke with a headache and a hollow feeling in my chest. I made coffee again, went through the motions of breakfast, showered, and dressed in comfortable clothes, gray wool pants and a navy turtleneck. Practical, unremarkable, invisible. At 10 a.m, my phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was a spam call, but something made me pick up. "Eleanor? It's Richard. Richard Sterling." My heart stopped. Richard Sterling. The name alone sent me tumbling backward through time, landing somewhere in 1979 in a college library where a young man with an easy smile and bright blue eyes had asked if anyone was sitting in the chair across from mine. "Richard?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. He laughed, and the sound of it was exactly as I remembered. Warm, genuine, infectious. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me." "It's been, 43 years? 44 in March?" I said automatically, then felt embarrassed. Did that make me sound like I'd been counting? Waiting? 44, he repeated softly. "God, Eleanor, where does the time go?" I sank into my chair, The phone pressed to my ear, my free hand gripping the armrest. Richard Sterling. We'd been together for 2 years in college, that intense kind of young love where everything feels eternal and inevitable. We talked about getting married after graduation, about building a life together. And then he'd gotten accepted to a business program at the London School of Economics, an opportunity too good to pass up. And I'd been offered a job at a company in New York, the kind of job that could launch a career. We'd tried long distance for 6 months, transatlantic calls that cost a fortune, and left us both frustrated by the things we couldn't say through static and delay. Eventually, we'd agreed it was too hard, that we needed to let each other go, to live our separate lives. I'd met Thomas 2 years later, married him, been happy, really, genuinely happy. I hadn't spent the past 4 decades pining for Richard Sterling, but I'd wondered, sometimes, late at night or in quiet moments, I'd wondered what became of him, whether he'd married, whether he ever thought of me. "I'm in New York," Richard was saying. "Spending the holidays here, actually. Stayed at one of my hotels, the one on 5th Avenue. You know it?" "You own hotels?" The question sounded stupid, even as I asked it, but my brain was still catching up to the reality of this conversation. "A few," he said, with what sounded like genuine modesty. "Built a little business over the years. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy." I'd Googled him once, about 5 years ago, late at night after a glass of wine when I was feeling nostalgic. Richard Sterling owned a chain of luxury boutique hotels across North America and Europe. He'd been featured in Forbes. His estimated net worth was somewhere in the vicinity of $500 million. Nothing fancy. "Eleanor," his voice turned serious. "I ran into Michael Chen yesterday. Your Michael. We're old friends, actually. I've been using him as a financial advisor for years. He mentioned you'd be alone for New Year's Eve, and I have to say, I almost didn't believe him." "You? Alone? What kind of nonsense is that?" My throat tightened. "Michael, of course. My financial advisor, the man who'd helped me manage my retirement accounts for the past 27 years, who'd helped me turn a decent pension into a comfortable nest egg. He and Richard were friends. Of course they were. It was a small world at that level of wealth and success. It's a long story," I managed. "Then come tell me in person," Richard said, his tone brooking no argument. "I'm hosting a party at my hotel on New Year's Eve. Penthouse suite, incredible view of the city, small gathering, maybe 50 people, good company, French champagne, dinner prepared by a chef I flew in from Paris. I'll send a car for you at 8:30 on the 31st. I won't take no for an answer." "Richard, I couldn't possibly." "Eleanor Vance, in all the years I've known you, and yes, I'm counting the 44 years even though we haven't spoken, you've never been someone who runs away from life. Don't start now. 8:30, formal attire, be ready." "I don't even know if I have anything appropriate to wear." "You do," he said with absolute confidence. "You've always had impeccable taste. Just trust me on this." "And Eleanor?" "Yes? I've spent 44 years wondering if I made the right choice, going to London instead of staying with you. I'm not going to waste whatever time we have left. See you on the 31st. He hung up before I could protest further. I sat there, phone in hand, my mind reeling. Richard Sterling, New Year's Eve, a party with senators and CEOs, and the kind of people who probably summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. What was I thinking? I couldn't go to something like that. I was a retired HR executive who lived in a modest apartment and hadn't attended a formal event in years. I'd be completely out of place. But then another voice in my head, smaller but fiercer, whispered, "And what's your alternative? Sitting here alone while your son celebrates with people he considers sophisticated? Proving Tiffany right, that you're just a simple old woman who doesn't belong in elevated circles?" I stood up and walked to my bedroom. The burgundy gown was still hanging on the outside of my closet door, where I'd left it yesterday in a moment of defiant fantasy. I looked at it now, with new eyes. Could I? Could I actually do this? I picked up the phone and called the seamstress I'd used for years, a woman named Rosa who had a shop 6 blocks away. "Rosa, it's Eleanor Vance. I know this is last minute, but I need a favor. I have a gown that needs to be altered, and I need it by December 31st. Is that possible?" Rosa, bless her, didn't even hesitate. "For you, Mrs. Vance. Of course, bring it by this afternoon. We'll make it perfect." Next, I called my hair salon. "Isabella, it's Eleanor. I need an appointment on December 31st. Yes, I know it's a busy day. Whatever time you have available, I need the works, cut, color, styling. Mrs. Vance, Isabella sounded delighted. You haven't asked for the works in years. What's the occasion? I'm going to a party, I said, and hearing the words out loud made them real. A very important party. Then we'll make you look like a queen, Isabella promised. When I hung up, I looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. Not the tired, defeated woman I'd seen for the past 2 days, but the woman underneath, the one who'd raised a child alone after being widowed, the one who'd climbed the corporate ladder in an era when women had to work twice as hard for half the recognition, the one who'd managed multi-million-dollar budgets and negotiated with executives who tried to intimidate her. That woman was still in there. She'd just been dormant, invisible, forgotten, but she was about to wake up. The rest of December 29th passed in a blur of activity. I took the gown to Rosa, who measured and pinned and promised it would be perfect. I went to the department store and bought new shoes, elegant heels in a neutral shade that would work with the burgundy. I splurged on a new clutch, something small and sophisticated in black satin. I bought new undergarments, new hosiery, all the small details that no one would see, but that would make me feel put together. That evening, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by shopping bags, my phone buzzed. It was Lily again. Another secret message. Grandma, Mom is being really mean. She said you're too busy to come to the party, but Dad said you had nowhere else to go. I don't understand. Are you coming or not? I miss you. My hands shook as I read those words. Too busy. That's what Tiffany was telling Lily. As if I'd chosen not to come. As if I'd rejected them rather than the other way around. The lie was calculated. It absolved them of guilt while painting me as the absent grandmother who prioritized other things over family. It was brilliant, really, and vicious. I texted back, "Sweetheart, the truth is, Grandma wasn't invited. But don't worry about it. Adults sometimes make decisions that don't make sense, but it's not your fault. I love you so much. And yes, I am going to be busy on New Year's Eve. I have a very special party to attend. I'll tell you all about it when I see you." Let Tiffany explain that to Lily when the child asked questions. December 30th passed quietly. I spent the day reading, really reading this time, losing myself in stories about other people's lives, other people's problems. I cleaned the apartment again, not from anxiety this time, but from excitement. I was preparing, getting ready, transforming. That evening I pulled out the jewelry box I kept in my dresser drawer. Most of it was costume jewelry, pretty but inexpensive pieces I'd collected over the years. But at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, were the pieces that mattered. My engagement ring from Thomas, a simple gold band with a small diamond. The pearl earrings his mother had given me on our wedding day. The sapphire pendant I'd bought for myself when I'd been promoted to vice president. A reward for 20 years of hard work. I'd wear the pearls, I decided, and the sapphire. Subtle elegance. Quiet confidence. On the morning of December 31st, I woke with a strange calm. This was it. The day everything changed. I could feel it in my bones, in the way the light came through my window, in the rhythm of my breathing. I spent the morning slowly, deliberately. I had a light breakfast. I did gentle stretches to loosen my muscles. I took a long, hot shower, using the expensive soap I'd been saving for no particular reason. Today was the reason. At 2 p.m, I went to the salon. Isabella greeted me with a huge smile and ushered me to her chair like I was royalty. "Mrs. Vance, we're going to make magic today." And she did. She trimmed my hair, removing the dead ends and shaping it into a sleek style that framed my face. She added subtle highlights to blend the gray into a sophisticated silver blonde. She gave me a manicure and pedicure, painting my nails a deep rose color. She did my makeup, not heavy, but expertly applied. Smoky eyes that made my brown eyes look mysterious. A soft blush that gave my cheeks a healthy glow. Lipstick in a classic red that made my lips look fuller, more defined. When she spun the chair around so I could see myself in the mirror, I gasped. The woman staring back at me was elegant, polished, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with confidence. I looked like someone who belonged at exclusive parties, who mingled with important people, who commanded respect. "Isabella," I breathed, "this is incredible." "No, Mrs. Vance," she corrected gently. "You were always incredible. I just helped you remember." I arrived home at 6 o'clock, 2.5 hours to get dressed. I took my time, treating each step like a ritual. I put on the new undergarments, the silk slip, the hosiery. I stepped into the burgundy gown, and when Rosa's alterations proved perfect, the dress hugging my figure in all the right places, falling in elegant lines to the floor, I felt tears prick my eyes. I fastened the pearl earrings, clasped the sapphire pendant around my neck, slipped my feet into the new heels, picked up the black satin clutch. At 7:45, I stood in front of my full-length mirror and looked at the complete picture. I looked like someone who mattered, someone who belonged, someone who had value and worth and dignity. I looked like myself. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Car arriving in 5 minutes. Can't wait to see you. R. I picked up my coat, a long wool wrap in charcoal gray that I'd bought years ago but rarely wore, and draped it over my shoulders. I took one last look around my small apartment, at the life I'd built here, at the woman I'd been, and then I walked out the door. The lobby of my building was empty when I stepped off the elevator. The superintendent, Mr. Rodriguez, was reading a newspaper behind his desk. He looked up as I walked past, and his jaw literally dropped. "Mrs. Vance, is that you?" I smiled at him, feeling a surge of confidence I hadn't felt in years. "Good evening, Mr. Rodriguez. Happy New Year." You look beautiful, Mrs. Vance. Absolutely beautiful. "Where are you going?" "To a party," I said simply. "A very special party." Outside, the December air was crisp and cold, biting at my exposed skin. But I barely felt it, because parked directly in front of my building, gleaming under the streetlights, was a black stretch limousine. A chauffeur in a black suit and white gloves stood beside the open rear door. He was young, maybe 30, with a professional demeanor and a warm smile. "Ms. Eleanor Vance? That's me. Mr. Sterling has sent me to escort you to the party. My name is James. May I help you with your coat?" I let him guide me into the back of the limousine. The interior was stunning. Cream leather seats, ambient lighting, a small bar area with crystal glasses. As soon as I was settled, James closed the door and walked around to the driver's seat. And that's when I looked up and saw them. Mrs. Chen, my neighbor from the 3rd floor, was walking her Pomeranian. She stopped dead in her tracks, staring at the limousine. Behind her, the Johnsons from the 4th floor stood frozen on the sidewalk, their mouths open. Mr. Rodriguez had come out of the building and was watching with undisguised amazement. I lifted my hand in a small wave. The limousine pulled away from the curb smoothly, gliding into Manhattan traffic. Inside, I found a note on the seat beside me, written on heavy cream cardstock in elegant script. "Eleanor, I've waited 44 years to see you again. Thank you for giving me this chance. There's champagne in the cooler if you'd like a glass. Take your time. Enjoy the ride. Yours, Richard." I poured myself a small glass of champagne, Dom Perignon, I noticed, and sipped it slowly as the city passed by outside the tinted windows. We drove through Midtown, past the bright lights and crowded sidewalks, heading to the part of Manhattan where old money lived. The limousine pulled up in front of a hotel I'd walked past 100 times but never entered, the Sterling Continental. Richard's Hotel. A doorman in a dark green coat smiled warmly as James helped me out. "Good evening, madam. Welcome." The lobby took my breath away. Marble floors, Art Deco light fixtures, a sweeping staircase. The space smelled like expensive flowers and old money. A woman in an elegant black suit approached me. "Ms. Vance, Mr. Sterling is expecting you. I'll escort you to the penthouse." We rode the elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, we stepped directly into a private foyer with only one door. The woman knocked gently, then opened it, and there he was. Richard Sterling stood in the center of an enormous living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his silver hair combed back, his blue eyes, still the same blue after all these years, fixed on me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled and crossed the room toward me. "Eleanor, 44 years, and you're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." He took my hand and kissed it gently. "Richard," my voice shook slightly, "you haven't changed." He laughed. "I've changed. Got older, grayer, but apparently not wiser because I'm still an idiot for letting you go." Behind him, I could see the party in progress. Elegant people in formal wear, champagne flutes catching the light, soft jazz music. Through the windows, Manhattan glittered like scattered jewels. "Come," Richard said, tucking my hand into his arm. "Let me introduce you to some people. Then you're going to tell me everything about your life." The next 2 hours passed like a dream. Richard introduced me to governors and senators and CEOs, a famous actress, an author whose books I'd read. These weren't just wealthy people. They were accomplished, interesting people. And the shocking thing was, I belonged. When Richard mentioned I'd been a senior vice president, a tech CEO wanted my advice on retention strategies. When I mentioned I'd read the author's latest novel, we discussed it for 30 minutes. I wasn't invisible here. I wasn't simple. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. At 11 o'clock, Richard pulled me onto the terrace. Heat lamps kept it warm despite the December cold. The city spread out below us, endless lights. "Eleanor," Richard said quietly, "when Michael told me you were going to be alone on New Year's Eve, I couldn't believe it. How is that possible?" And the wall I'd built around my pain cracked. My son excluded me from his party. He said there was no room for me. His wife is building this image of success, and apparently I don't fit into that picture. Richard's face darkened. He did what? He's ashamed of me. I live simply. I don't fit the Instagram perfect life they're trying to project. "Eleanor, look at me." Richard's hands were on my shoulders. "You are many things, but ordinary is not one of them. You accomplished incredible things in your career. You raised a child alone. You have dignity and grace. If your son can't see that, he's the one who should be ashamed." Inside, someone called out that it was 5 minutes to midnight. We stood together as the countdown began. 10, 9, 8, 3, 2, 1. "Happy New Year!" Fireworks exploded over the park. Richard turned to me and kissed me gently, sweetly. "To new beginnings, Eleanor. To you, remembering that you're remarkable." We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The party continued past midnight. Around 1 a.m., Richard walked me to a quiet corner. "I don't want to overwhelm you, but I have to be honest. I'd like to spend time with you. Real time. See if there's still something here." "I'd like that too." "Good. Then have dinner with me tomorrow night. Just you and me." "I'd love that." I stayed until 2:30, then Richard walked me to the car. When the limousine pulled up to my building at 3:15 a.m., I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. My apartment was dark and quiet. I walked to the window, looking at my reflection. I still looked beautiful. More importantly, I felt beautiful. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "Thank you for the best New Year's Eve I've had in decades. Sleep well." I was about to put the phone down when another notification appeared. An email from an unknown address. Subject line, "You need to see this." I opened it. There was a video attachment. I almost deleted it, but curiosity won. The video was dark, clearly shot on a phone. Then I recognized Daniel and Tiffany's living room, their party. The camera was shaky, like someone filming secretly. Then I heard voices. "I mean, it's for the best." Tiffany's voice, slurred. She would have just brought down the whole vibe. "You know how she is." "I know." Daniel's voice. My son's voice. "But did we have to be so harsh?" "Daniel, baby, listen. Your mother is nice, but she's not the kind of person who impresses people. She lives in that tiny apartment, dresses like she shops at JCPenney. This party was important for my brand. I can't have followers thinking I come from that." I held my breath, waiting for Daniel to defend me. "You're right," he said. "I just feel bad about Lily. Lily will forget. Kids are resilient, and honestly, Eleanor's probably relieved. She can sit at home and do whatever old people do. Knit or whatever." They both laughed. The video ended. I sat in my dark apartment, staring at the black screen, not feeling sadness, not hurt, anger, cold, clear, righteous anger. I looked at the email again. At the bottom was a note. "Mrs. Vance, you taught my daughter at her first job. You were kind. She was waitressing tonight and recorded this. Thought you should know. You deserve better." I stood, walked to my bedroom and opened my closet. Behind winter coats was a filing box. I pulled it out and set it on my bed. Inside were financial records, receipts, copies of checks, the paper trail of everything I'd done for Daniel. I'd kept these not because I planned to use them, but because decades in HR had taught me. Always document everything. Always keep proof. Now I knew why. I opened my laptop and began calculating. Private school tuition, $197,000 over 12 years. Tutoring, $38,000. College consulting, $12,000. His first car down payment, $14,500. The condo down payment after Thomas died, $28,000. The wedding, $65,000. Plus thousands in smaller amounts over the years. I did the math 3 times, $354,500. I had given my son $354,500, and he couldn't make room for me at his table. I closed my laptop and looked at the burgundy gown still hanging on my closet door. I thought about the party, the respect I'd been shown, Richard's kindness. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg for scraps of attention. I wasn't going to accept being invisible. I was going to do what I'd done for 37 years in boardrooms, fight back, strategically, with documentation and evidence. They wanted sophisticated, they wanted impressive. They were about to learn exactly who Eleanor Vance was. January 2nd dawned clear and cold. I woke at 6:30 with unusual clarity. The hurt had crystallized into something harder, more focused. Over coffee, I reviewed the video again, taking notes. I saved copies. Then I called my lawyer. Marcus Webb had been Thomas's college roommate. When he answered, his voice was warm. "Eleanor, Happy New Year!" "Marcus, I need your help. I need you to review financial documents and help me understand my legal options." I explained everything. The exclusion, the video, the $354,500. When I finished, Marcus was silent. "Eleanor, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. You're right to document everything. I want you to hire a private investigator. If Tiffany's building a brand on a lifestyle she can't afford, she and Daniel might be in deep debt. You need to know before making decisions. Do it. Hire someone. I want to know everything. I'll make calls. Meanwhile, don't contact Daniel. Don't tip your hand." That afternoon, Marcus called back. "I've got someone excellent, former FBI. She'll start immediately." Her name was Janet Morrison, and she was thorough. Over the next week, she gathered information that made my blood run cold. The house in Greenwich that Daniel implied he owned? Rented, $4,200 monthly. The luxury SUV Tiffany posted about constantly? Leased, $950 monthly. Tiffany's wellness brand generated approximately $12,000 annually, while her expenses, the professional photos, the rented props, the sponsored-looking lifestyle, ran close to $40,000 yearly. Daniel's salary as regional sales manager? $78,000 annually. Good, but nowhere near enough to support their lifestyle. Their credit card debt? $137,000 across 8 cards. They were drowning. And they'd been borrowing money from me to stay afloat while posting photos of a perfect life online. Janet's report was devastating. "Mrs. Vance, they're approximately 3 months from financial collapse. The minimum payments alone are eating up 40% of Daniel's take-home pay. They're one emergency away from bankruptcy." I sat with that information for 2 days, feeling sick. Then Richard called. "Eleanor, I'm back from Boston. Dinner tonight?" Over dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant, I told him everything. The video, the investigation, the debt. Richard listened without interrupting, his face growing darker. When I finished, he reached across the table and took my hand. "What do you want to do?" "I want them to understand what they've done. I want them to face consequences. But I don't want to destroy my son. Despite everything, he's still my son. Then you need to confront them. Show them the evidence. Give them a choice. Face reality or face ruin." "I don't know if I can." "Eleanor, you can. You're one of the strongest people I've ever known, and I'll be there if you need me." On January 15th, I called Daniel. My voice was calm, measured. "Daniel, I need to see you and Tiffany, both of you, this Saturday at 2 p.m., at your house." "Mom, we're kind of busy on Saturday." "This isn't a request, Daniel. 2 p.m., don't make me repeat myself." I hung up before he could respond. That Saturday was bitterly cold. I dressed carefully in a charcoal gray suit I'd worn in boardrooms, paired with my pearls. Professional, authoritative. I carried a leather portfolio containing copies of everything. The financial records, the investigator's report, the video. I drove to Greenwich in my old Honda, arriving exactly at 2 p.m. The rented house looked impressive from the outside. Colonial style, white columns, perfectly landscaped. The illusion of success. I rang the doorbell. Daniel answered, looking nervous. "Hey, Mom, come in." Tiffany sat in the living room, her expression wary. She was dressed casually, yoga pants and a designer sweatshirt that probably cost $200. Her phone was in her hand, ready to document or escape. I wasn't sure which. "Where's Lily?" I asked. "At a friend's house," Daniel said. "You said this was important. We figured it was better if she wasn't here." Good thinking? I sat in the armchair across from them, set my portfolio on the coffee table, and looked at them both. Really looked. Daniel fidgeted. Tiffany's jaw was set defensively. "Let me start by saying this. I love you, Daniel. You're my son. Nothing will ever change that. But what's about to happen is going to be very difficult, and I need you both to listen without interrupting." I opened the portfolio and pulled out the first document, my financial summary. Over the past 30 years, I have given you $354,500. This includes your private school tuition, totaling $197,000, tutoring and college preparation, $38,000. Your first car down payment, $14,500. The down payment for your first condo, $28,000 from your father's life insurance. Your wedding, $65,000. And countless smaller amounts over the years. Every penny is documented here. I placed the spreadsheet on the table. Daniel had gone pale. Tiffany's eyes were wide. I never asked for repayment. I never mentioned these amounts, because that's what mothers do. We give freely. But I want you to understand the magnitude of what I've provided. I pulled out the next document, the investigator's report. This house you live in, rented for $4,200 monthly. Your SUV Tiffany, leased for $950 monthly. Your wellness brand generates approximately $12,000 annually while costing you $40,000 to maintain. Your combined credit card debt is $137,000. You are 3 months from bankruptcy. Tiffany stood up. "How dare you investigate us? That's an invasion of privacy." "Sit down," I said quietly, and something in my voice made her obey. "I'm not finished." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. "On New Year's Eve, while I was at a party with a man who values me, one of your waitstaff recorded this conversation. Would you like me to play it, or would you prefer to explain to me directly why you think I'm an embarrassment?" The color drained from both their faces. "Mom," Daniel's voice cracked. "I didn't mean—" "You laughed, Daniel. She said I was something you came from, implied I was low class and embarrassing, and you agreed. You laughed." Tiffany started crying. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I was drunk. I didn't mean those things." "Yes, you did. That's the truth of it. When people drink, they say what they really think, and what you really think is that I'm not good enough for your curated fake life." I stood, gathering my documents. "Here's what's going to happen. You have 2 choices. Choice 1, you can continue this charade, continue drowning in debt, continue living beyond your means. Eventually, you'll lose everything. The house, the car, possibly even custody of Lily if you can't provide stability. Or," Daniel whispered, "or you admit you need help. You sell the leased car and buy something affordable. You move to an apartment you can actually afford. Tiffany stops pretending to be a wealthy influencer and gets a real job. You enter credit counseling. You rebuild your life on honesty instead of lies." "And what about you?" Tiffany asked bitterly. "Are you going to help us or just judge us?" "I'm done giving you money," I said firmly. "But I'll give you something more valuable. I'll watch Lily 3 afternoons a week so you can both work without daycare costs. I'll teach you budgeting, the way I budgeted for 37 years to give you everything you took for granted. I'll help you climb out of this hole, but only if you're honest, only if you respect me, only if you treat me like family instead of an embarrassment." Daniel was crying now. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I was weak. Tiffany wanted this lifestyle, and I wanted to give it to her, and we just kept pretending." "I know," I said softly, "but pretending doesn't work forever. Eventually, reality comes knocking." I walked to the door, then turned back. "You have until Monday to decide. Call me with your answer. And Daniel, if you choose pride over reality, if you choose the fake life over your daughter's stability, then you'll have made a choice about what kind of man you are. I raised you better than that. I hope you remember who you were before you became who you're pretending to be." I walked out, got in my Honda, and drove away. Daniel called on Sunday evening. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying for hours. "Mom, we need your help. We'll do whatever it takes. Please don't give up on us." The next 3 months were hard. They terminated their lease and moved to a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Stamford. Tiffany sold her designer wardrobe and got a job as a personal trainer at an actual gym, not pretending to be an influencer. Daniel took a second job on weekends. They entered credit counseling. I watched Lily 3 afternoons weekly. We baked cookies, read books, did homework together. That child blossomed, having her grandmother back in her life consistently. Slowly, painfully, they began rebuilding. Tiffany deleted her Instagram account, the one that had caused so much financial ruin, and started living in reality instead of for an audience. Daniel began to remember the values I'd taught him about integrity and honest work. In March, they invited me to dinner at their small apartment. Nothing fancy, spaghetti and salad, but cooked with their own hands in their own kitchen. "Mom," Daniel said as we sat around their modest table, "I need to say something. I was ashamed of the wrong things. I was ashamed of you when I should have been ashamed of myself. You built a real life on real values. I built a fake life on credit cards and lies. I'm so sorry for how I treated you." Tiffany spoke next, her voice sincere. "Eleanor, I was cruel. I valued appearances over people. I'm learning, slowly, that things don't make you happy. That showing off for strangers doesn't matter. That family does. Thank you for not giving up on us." I looked at my son, at this man who'd lost his way, but was finding it again. "I love you, Daniel. Always. But love doesn't mean accepting disrespect. It means holding each other accountable to be our best selves." Lily hugged me tight. "Grandma, I'm so glad you're here. I missed you. I missed you too, sweetheart." As for Richard, we've been inseparable. He splits his time between Boston and New York now, and when he's in the city, we're together. We've traveled to Paris, to London, to places I'd never imagined I'd see. He treats me like I'm precious, valuable, worthy of love and respect. "Are we getting married?" I asked him one evening as we walked through Central Park. He laughed. "Eleanor, I learned my lesson the first time. I'm not letting you get away again. Whenever you're ready, just say the word. I'm not ready yet. I'm enjoying this. The dating, the discovery, the freedom to be Eleanor Vance, not anyone's wife or mother or grandmother, just myself. But someday, maybe. My life now is peaceful, simple, rich in the ways that matter. I live in my modest apartment because I love it. I see Richard several times weekly. I spend time with Lily regularly. Daniel and Tiffany are rebuilding, and I'm proud of the work they're doing. I learned something through all of this. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself. For too long, I accepted being made invisible because I didn't want to cause conflict. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. Never again. I'm 61 years old. I have silver in my hair and lines on my face and hands that show decades of work. And I'm more powerful now than I've ever been because I know exactly who I am. I'm Eleanor Vance. I built a career. I raised a child. I loved deeply and lost and loved again. I gave generously and was taken for granted and learned to set boundaries. I'm simple and sophisticated, quiet and strong, ordinary and remarkable. And I'm finally, completely, unapologetically happy. To anyone reading this who feels invisible, who's been made to feel small by people who should lift you up, remember that dignity isn't given. It's claimed. Stand up, speak up, document everything. Set boundaries, demand respect, and if they can't see your worth, show them. Not with cruelty, but with strength. Not with revenge, but with consequences. Not by becoming someone you're not, but by fully becoming who you've always been. They'll see you then. They won't have a choice. Now, if you'll excuse me, Richard is taking me to the opera tonight. I have a burgundy gown that needs wearing and a life that needs living, and I intend to do both spectacularly. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. Subscribe to hear more stories of resilience, dignity, and second chances. Your next story is playing now.